Should have taken better care of him. That's what my brother said loud enough for the whole room to hear right after the will, named him heir to the multi-million business, and left me the rundown farmhouse. Laughter scraped the walls of the conference room. Cousins looked away. The lawyer cleared his throat. I didn't argue. I pressed my thumb into the brass house key until it hurt and watched my brother grin like he'd won forever. Then the lawyer glanced at me and said, "Actually," the air shifted. "If you want to see what came next, stay with me. The morning my father died, the house smelled like coffee and antiseptic. I'd been sleeping in the armchair beside his bed for weeks, waking every 2 hours to check his breathing and keep the oxygen line from tangling. His hand was warm even when his pulse grew faint. My father, Richard Campbell, wasn't the kind of man who said, 'I love you.' He showed it through structure, through order. A former soldier turned businessman, he built Campbell Printing Solutions from a single press in our garage into a multi-million-dollar company. People in Asheville called him the Quiet General. He believed discipline could fix anything, machines, people, even grief. Then there was Ethan, my older brother by 2 years. Growing up, he was the golden child, the loud one, the confident one, the one Dad called future CEO. Before he was even out of high school, Ethan could charm anyone, teachers, investors, women, twice his age. He had Dad's drive, but none of his patience. Where Dad built, Ethan bragged. Where I listened, Ethan performed. Our paths couldn't have been more different. I became an interior designer working freelance jobs across town. Ethan moved to Charlotte wearing tailored suits and talking about growth potential like it was a religion. We rarely spoke except through Dad. When Mom died 6 years ago, whatever was left of family between us cracked for good. During Dad's final months, I was the only one here. Ethan called maybe twice a month, short check-ins that always ended with "hang in there, kiddo. You're doing great." He never once asked what great meant when you're feeding a man soup at midnight or cleaning up spilled medicine at 3 a.m. The hospice nurse, Rita Lawson, came every morning at 9. She'd been with our family for over 10 years, first as Dad's bookkeeper, then as his caretaker when his heart began to fail. Rita had the kind of quiet wisdom that could fill a room. Sometimes she'd pause at the door and say, "He's proud of you, Ivy. He just doesn't know how to say it." I'd nod, pretending I believed her. One rainy morning just before dawn, Dad asked me to open the windows. Cold air drifted in, carrying the smell of wet oak. He looked out toward the trees he'd planted the year I was born and said, "You always notice the details. That's your strength. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." He passed away 2 days later quietly, like he'd finished the last line of a long letter. At the funeral, Ethan arrived in a charcoal Tom Ford suit and sunglasses too dark for the cloudy day. He moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, thanking guests for their support. When people offered condolences, he turned every sentence back to the company, Dad's legacy, the future expansion plans. I stood near the casket, feeling invisible. After the service, Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "You handled all this well. Dad would have been proud." Then he smiled, half sympathy, half ownership. 3 weeks later, the lawyer called us in for the will reading. That was the day Ethan's laughter filled the room, the day he said it. Should have taken better care of him. But the truth, my father had already taken care of me, just not in the way Ethan would ever understand. The office of Morrison & Associates smelled like furniture polish and old money. The mahogany table stretched longer than necessary, its surface shining under fluorescent light. On one side sat Ethan Legs, crossed cufflinks flashing his confidence, filling the space like cologne. On the other, me holding my bag in my lap, trying not to stare at the framed certificates that said "Excellence in Estate Law." The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had been with our family for decades. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading. The words came out dry and formal, like someone peeling tape off an old wound. "To my son, Ethan Campbell, I leave Campbell, Printing Solutions, including all its assets, accounts, and operations valued at approximately $4 million. I heard a faint whistle, Ethan's, of course. He leaned back, smirking like this was his coronation day. Then Mr. Harrison continued, "To my daughter, Ivy Campbell, I leave the family farmhouse at 17 Oak Street, including all belongings within." Silence. Even the air conditioner paused. Ethan let out a short laugh. The farmhouse. The one with the roof caving in. He turned to the lawyer, pretending to whisper, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess she gets what she put into it. A few awkward chuckles followed. I didn't move. I just stared at the line of text on the document as if maybe I'd missed something. An addendum, a clause, a reason. But there wasn't one. Mr. Harrison's tone shifted almost apologetic. That concludes the reading. I signed where he told me to the pen, trembling only once. Ethan stood, stretched his arms, and said, Well, that's that. Guess Dad knew who could actually handle responsibility. I wanted to scream, to ask why Dad, who'd watched me stay up nights fixing his medication charts, thought I deserved nothing more than peeling paint and unpaid taxes. But instead, I gathered my bag, nodded politely to the lawyer, and left. In the hallway, Ethan caught up with me. Don't take it personal, he said with a grin that wasn't kind. Next time, try not to play nurse. Maybe then you'll get something worth keeping. That was the moment the air left my lungs. He walked away, whistling his phone already pressed to his ear, talking about mergers and board approvals. I stepped outside, the late afternoon sun hitting my face, and looked down at the brass key in my hand. It was heavy, warm from my palm. I didn't know why, but I couldn't let go of it. Maybe it wasn't just a key to a rundown house. Maybe it was the one thing my father wanted me to find. The first night back at the farmhouse felt like stepping into a ghost's memory. Dust floated in the air like slow snow. Every board creaked. The kitchen still smelled faintly of Dad's pipe tobacco, though he hadn't smoked in years. I set my bag down on the counter, opened the faucet, and watched brown water sputter out. This was what I'd been left with. Rot leaks, silence. I walked room to room, tracing the outlines of old photographs still hanging crooked on the wall. Mom smiling beside the oak trees. Ethan at 10 holding his first trophy. Me smaller off to the side, almost cropped out of the frame. In the living room, I sank onto the sofa and replayed Ethan's voice in my head. Next time, try not to play nurse. It wasn't just a jab. It was his way of confirming that he'd won, that Dad's last act had chosen him. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not loud, just steady. The kind of crying that empties you out enough to start thinking clearly again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the gaps in the curtains. I made coffee in Dad's old percolator and wandered into his study. The desk drawers were organized the way he'd always kept them. Pencils lined up, invoices stacked, everything in its place. But when I tried to move the desk to sweep behind it, something shifted. A hollow sound echoed from the wall. I froze. Knocked once. Hollow again. 2 feet to the left solid. My pulse picked up. I crouched down, running my fingers along the baseboard until I felt a seam, a narrow strip, where the paint didn't quite match. I grabbed a screwdriver from the toolbox, pried it open, and revealed a small metal panel with a keypad. A code. I stared at it for a long time, then typed the only numbers that made sense: Mom's birthday. The keypad clicked a soft mechanical sigh, and the panel swung open. Inside, a fireproof safe, small but deep. My hand shook as I pulled it out. There was a letter taped to the front, my name written in Dad's handwriting. If you're reading this, you found what I needed you to find. This was never about money, Ivy. Inside were bank statements, investment documents, and a tiny brass key labeled First National Bank, Box 212. I sat there staring at the letter, the safe, the dust dancing in sunlight. All this time he hadn't ignored me. He trusted me to find it. I folded the note carefully, held the bank key tight, and whispered to the empty room, "Okay, Dad, I'll finish what you started." The next morning, I drove to First National Bank downtown. The brass key felt heavier in my pocket with every mile. It was the kind of spring morning Dad loved: blue sky, cool air, sunlight, glinting off windshields. He would have said, "Good day to build something." I parked under the shade of an oak tree and sat there a minute, palms damp, staring at the marble steps that led to the glass doors. Inside, the bank smelled of polish and paper. A woman in her 50s approached with a practiced smile. Her nameplate read, Mrs. Chen, branch manager. "I think this belongs to one of your boxes," I said, placing the small key on her desk. She examined it, then looked at me with faint recognition. "Campbell," I nodded. Her expression softened. "Your father was a meticulous man. Always came in on Fridays, same time, same coffee cup. She guided me through a set of heavy doors into the vault area. The walls hummed faintly from the climate control. We stopped in front of a small safety box marked 212. "Take all the time you need," she said, and left me alone. The lock clicked with surprising ease. Inside were neatly stacked folders, sealed envelopes, and one flash drive. The first folder was labeled Investments 2003 Tuning 22. Each document detailed shares, bond certificates, and accounts I'd never known existed. At the bottom sat an envelope with my name. I opened it slowly. "Ivy, if you're reading this, you passed the test I never could give your brother. Ethan has always measured worth by applause. You've always measured it by effort. I built my company for him to run, but I built this for you to understand. Inside this box is everything I've saved since you were 10. It's yours. Use it wisely, quietly, and never let arrogance touch it. You were my balance. Make me proud. Love, Dad." The numbers on those statements blurred before my eyes. $3 million in total value. Enough to rebuild the farmhouse, pay debts, and live without fear. But more than that, it was proof. Proof I wasn't invisible. I pressed my hand over my mouth and laughed just once, shaky and low. That afternoon, I called Mr. Harrison. "I need to meet," I said. "With Ethan present." He hesitated. "Is this about the estate?" "It's about closure," I replied. Ethan arrived 2 days later, late as always, his cologne entering the room before he did. The same mahogany table, same lawyer's office, but the air was different this time, thicker, expectant. I sat across from him, calm, a folder in front of me. He dropped into the chair, flashing that practiced grin. "So what's this about?" "Finally decided to sell the farmhouse." Mr. Harrison folded his hands. "Actually, Ethan, there are a few matters regarding your father's private holdings that need to be clarified." Ethan frowned. "Private holdings? Yes." Mr. Harrison opened a second file, the one I had handed him earlier. "Your father maintained a separate trust not listed in the initial will. He instructed that it be disclosed only once certain conditions were met." Ethan's smirk twitched. "What conditions?" I spoke for the first time. "That I find it myself." He laughed. "You find what?" "A couple of old bonds." Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. "Not quite. The trust includes diversified investments, property deeds, and accounts totaling over $3 million, all of which belong exclusively to your sister." The words hung in the air like a bell strike. Ethan's face went pale. What Mr. Harrison repeated it slowly. "Your sister, Ivy Campbell, is the sole beneficiary of your father's private trust." Ethan turned to me, voice cracking. "You knew about this. I found it," I said simply. "In the house you laughed at." He blinked, shaking his head. "No, Dad wouldn't. He wouldn't hide something like that from me." Mr. Harrison sighed. "He did. He wanted to see how each of you would handle what you were given. You were left the company, Ethan. Your sister was left the house." Ethan slammed his palm against the table. "That company was a disaster. He set me up to fail or to learn," I said quietly. He spun toward me, fury creeping into his face. "You think this makes you better than me? You got lucky." I met his eyes and saw the same boy from our childhood, the one who always needed to win, no matter the cost. "No," I said. "I got tested and I passed." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, his voice steady. "There's one more letter your father asked me to read aloud." He opened an envelope, unfolded a sheet of paper. "To my children, Ethan, leadership isn't control. It's responsibility. I gave you the company because I wanted you to build, not boast. Ivy, you understood value without ever chasing it. You saw things others overlooked. That's why the future belongs to you." The room went silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. He left me a sinking ship, and her a fortune. "Maybe he just gave us what we deserved," I said. His chair screeched back as he stood. "You think this is over?" "It already is," I said, standing too. "The difference between us, Ethan, you think money proves worth. I think choices do." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the diplomas on the wall rattled. Mr. Harrison gathered the papers quietly. "Your father would be proud, Ivy. Not for what you inherited, but for what you didn't lose." I smiled faintly. He always taught me to build from the ground up. A week later, I drove to the farmhouse again. The sky was turning orange, the fields humming with crickets. I walked up to the porch with a can of paint in one hand and the brass key in the other. The lock turned smoothly like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the light slanted across the old wood floors, illuminating dust and memories. I spread the papers from the trust across the table, sorting through plans, receipts, the letter. Ethan called that evening. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. His voice was strained. "Ivy, the company's bankrupt. Payroll bounced and clients pulled out. I need help. Just a loan, something to keep it afloat." I stared out the window at the oak trees swaying in the twilight. "Dad gave you a company worth millions," I said softly. "You could have made it work. I didn't have time. There were mistakes. Then fix them," I said. He went silent, then hissed, "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I replied. "I just learned from him." "You didn't." Before he could answer, I hung up. I set the phone down and picked up Dad's letter again. The words blurred slightly in the dim light, but I didn't need to read them. I already knew them by heart. He hadn't abandoned me. He trusted me. The farmhouse might have looked like decay from the outside, but inside it was a foundation, a place to start over. I walked out onto the porch, the same spot where he'd once told me, "Precision is respect." "Thank you," I whispered to the night. Somewhere beyond the fields, thunder rolled faint and distant like applause finally reaching its echo. 2 years passed before I realized the silence around the farmhouse no longer hurt. The roof no longer leaked. The paint gleamed soft white under the morning sun. The place Ethan once called a dump had become the headquarters of my small design firm, Oak Street Studio. Clients came from nearby towns, drawn to the warmth of spaces built by someone who understood repair. People said I had Dad's hands, careful, steady, capable of turning something broken into something that lasts. Ethan's name came up now and then. Rumors drifted through cousins or old coworkers he'd moved to Charlotte, taken a mid-level sales job, sold his cars. The empire he bragged about was gone piece by piece. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet kind of justice. He'd been forced to live the lesson Dad had written for him. Leadership without humility always collapses. Sometimes I still open the box from the bank, not for the money or the documents, but for the letter. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the words felt newer every time I read them. "You were my balance." That line stayed with me. Maybe that was what this all was, a balancing. Dad hadn't punished Ethan or rewarded me. He corrected the weight of our choices. On clear evenings, I sat on the front steps with a mug of coffee, listening to the wind move through the oak trees. The same trees Dad had planted decades ago. I wasn't angry anymore, just grateful. For the house that still stood, for the lesson that took years to understand, for the proof that sometimes the quiet ones really do finish the story. This morning, the light hit the porch the same way it did the day Dad died, soft, golden, steady. I stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, watching the wind ripple through the oak leaves. For the first time, I didn't think about what Ethan took. I thought about what I built. Dad's voice echoed in memory. "Precision is respect." He was right. Revenge hadn't needed fire or noise. It only needed patience. I locked the front door with the same brass key that started it all and smiled. The house wasn't just mine, it was proof. Proof that being underestimated can be the most powerful weapon in the world. If you've ever been the quiet one in the family, the one who stayed behind while others took the credit, you know this feeling. Tell me your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next one.